Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar titled Transitioning to the New Hospitality Supervisor and Senior Chef Production Apprenticeship Standards. Thank you for joining us. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to explain a few things about our webinar platform to allow you to get the most out of the experience. All viewers will be in listen-only mode. To engage with the webinar, please use the on-screen panel. Using the tabs of this panel, you can adjust your audio settings and choose to see the webcam of our presenters if available. You can also use the question tab to engage with us. We expect that our webinar will be extremely popular, but our team will do our best to answer your questions. During our webinar, we will be running a number of polls. To record your response, please click on the on-screen voting button when asked to do so. After the webinar, we will be providing a recording of the webinar, a copy of the slides, and a fact sheet to address any unanswered questions. Now, I'd like to hand over to our presenters for today, Jason, Ben, and Laura Tiso.
Good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our webinar update on Hospitality Supervisor and Senior Chef Production Apprenticeship Standards. My name is Jason Ben and I am Industry Manager for Hospitality and Catering here at City and Guilds, so thank you for joining us. And Laura will shortly answer a few questions as we close the webinar. So the agenda for today, we're going to have an overview of the apprenticeship reforms, planning and transition, senior chef production, hospitality supervisor occupation, planning and delivery and the points to consider, how we can support you and prepare you for delivery and endpoint assessments, some next steps, and then question and answers. You will notice that if you were with us on the previous level 2 webinar, there are some other things that will be repeated from that, so please bear with us. Thank you. So we're going to start with a quick overview of the apprenticeship reforms, and I'm sure you'll be well aware at this stage the details in the background of the current reforms that have taken place. Apprenticeships are changing, employers are already part of that process, and the most obvious change is the changing from the old standards to the new standards, and how there's quite a lot of employer engagement within these and how they've been developed with them also. Employers are in the driving seat, and it's a government initiative to ensure that employers are involved throughout this. So the all SACE frameworks, they basically consisted of qualifications, and you'll already be aware of that. And for the new occupational standards that we are covering today, there's no qualification required, and this allows for increased flexibility for you and increased effectiveness during the training period. So the funding changes, both of the occupations we're covering today are band 7, which is £5,000 funding band, so that's where they sit. Slight advantage over the all SACE frameworks.
Okay, we're just going to go to a quick poll question now. You'll see it flash up on your screen very shortly. The first question is, which standards are you planning on offering? They are senior chef production, hospitality supervisor, or both? Okay, I'm going to put the results up on your screen now. As you can see, 67% of you voted for both, with 27% falling on hospitality supervisor.
Okay, so providers, they will receive payments towards the additional costs associated with training 16 to 18-year-old apprenticeships and those requiring extra support. The amount will be up to 20% of the full cost of the framework for your apprenticeships. So age between 16 to 18-year-olds or 15 years of age if the apprentice's 16th birthday is between the last Friday of June and 31st of August. Age between 19 and 24, if you're age between 19 and 24, either an education health or care plan provided by the local authorities, or those who have been cared by the local authority. Or if you're undertaking an apprenticeship framework and recorded on the ILR as having a postcode listed within 27% of the deprived areas within the country. So planning your transitions, and why is it important to do so? You probably already have a much clearer understanding now of what you're going to offer, when this is going to start, but most of the SACE frameworks will now be switched off come 31st of December 2017. So these reforms are happening now, and you need to be planning now and making these changes. So, will you be staying with the SACE frameworks, or will you be moving over very shortly? Here at City and Guilds, we expect to have our Bravo submissions approved in the next 4 to 6 weeks for the 2 level 3 occupations. So that will be arranged shortly. So we should now be familiar with the key differences between the SACE frameworks and the Trailblazer apprenticeships. And as with the level 2 occupations, a working group of employers known as the Trailblazer Group is set up in exactly the same format as that for level 2s. And the inclusion of a 20% off-the-job program, training program, is to be provided with endpoint assessment. The key difference also against the continual assessments of the off frameworks. So Maths and English, for level 3 standards, learners must achieve a level 2 certification, qualification. See on the screen there that when you are developing your program, you can refer to our employer guide or the provider's guide, which are both available on our website, and the links will be provided later for you with these slides. The Trailblazer Group, that's just identifying those that were involved in the Trailblazer Group, which I'm sure you've already seen. So, developing the skills, knowledge and behaviours to prepare your apprenticeship learners for endpoint assessments. It's important to point out you need a minimum of 6 meetings within a year, or at least every 2 months, and this must be a recorded meeting that takes place. The provider and employer will need to build into the delivery plan the milestones against which progress can be reviewed and how it's going to be reviewed. On program records, they must be maintained, and this is important to support the apprentice. It's also important that the assessor and the employer are fully involved in the monitoring of the progress of the learner and development to ensure that they determine what the apprentice has achieved, and also to identify when they are fully competent in that job role and ready for endpoint assessments. Off-the-job training. This is learning which takes place outside the normal day-to-day working environments and helps to support the achievement of the apprenticeship. It can include delivery at the normal place of work, but must not be delivered as part of their normal working duties. And that's a really important aspect to consider. It can't be part of the normal working duties. Off-the-job training does not include training which takes place outside their paid working hours, and the minimum duration of an apprentice is based on an apprentice working 30 hours. If this is not the case, then the duration of the apprentice needs to be reviewed, and a pro rata will need to be taken into account. You can also refer to the apprenticeship funding rules, version 3, for further details on the rules and regulations around this. Okay. So what does not constitute off-the-job training? Areas like enrolment, induction. However, if you build in things such as health and safety, food safety, risk assessment, COSH, those sort of aspects, that sort of training would constitute as off-the-job training because it's linked to the job role. Diagnostic assessments or any prior assessment that you may run, any English or maths, progress reviews or program assessment needed for the apprenticeship standard or the framework, should you be included in a qualification within it, and off-the-job training only delivered by distance learning. You can include online and blended learning activities, but distant learning must not be the only off-the-job training that's taking place. Training takes place, and any training that takes place outside the apprenticeship's paid working hours. So off-the-job training must be used to support the learner in achieving their competence prior to passing their way through the gateway and achieving endpoint assessments. It must be planned in advance and planned together with the employer and the learner. Involving the employer is an essential ingredient to the success of the learner. Off-the-job training is an excellent opportunity to enhance the journey towards EPA. And on the board there is, or in the screen in front of you, is a list of suggestions of things that you could be considering to make that a much more exciting learning environment for the apprentice. You also need to look at the delivery times for some of the activities. You might want to consider master classes, competitions, doing things within term times, out of term time. Do you front load some of the activities such as your COSH and your risk assessments, your health and safety, your basic skills development, particularly any that might be required, and then backloading any revision purposes that you might need to do. The commitment statements, the evidence pack, this is a collection of the documents that need to be collated together to provide a single point of reference relating to the learning that takes place. It's important that the information relates to the evidence, the evidence is related to the apprenticeship and is also kept available to make sure that you're eligible for funding and should the SFA require it. The evidence pack must include information such as negotiated costs that have been agreed between the employer and the provider, details how the 20% off-the-job training is quantified and how it's going to be delivered, and also details on any maths and English and how that's going to be delivered also. Details of employment, including the name of the employer, the agreed contracted hours with employment, and including the paid training and 20% off-the-job time, and total planned length of the apprenticeship. A commitment statement must also be signed and dated by the apprentice, the employer, and the main provider. Okay, so moving on to the senior chef production standards. So for all our occupational standards, biggest changes are not having a qualification and moving from continual assessment to endpoint assessment. So we're going to have a closer look at this standard and what it consists of around endpoint assessments. So senior chef. The senior chef production will be working very closely. First of all, it's a very good or very possible progression from a level 2 apprenticeship. Ideal for a chef working towards supervisory in a large production kitchen. And the primary objective of the senior chef is, in production is to have a real focus on kitchen supervisory and stroke management. And if you look at the standards, that very much comes out of it. As a senior chef, you'll be expected to develop a rounded experience of people skills, food safety, as well as the business and further developing your culinary skills as required. Essentially, the assessment of learning is split into 3 sections covering the knowledge, skills and the behaviours or attitudes. The criteria to be covered are found in the Senior Chef Production and Occupational Standards, which is a standalone document which outlines the criteria to be covered. However, more details can be found in the assessment plan, which outlines the modules of pass and distinction requirements and the method of assessments for EPA on this occupation, which includes an on-demand test, practical observation, a business project, and a professional discussion. The period of learning, development, and continual assessment is managed by the employer, and in most cases with the support of a training provider. The on-program pace will be driven by the individual, as well as the breadth of experience an employer can offer prior to the apprenticeship program taking place. It's expected that the program will take a minimum of 12 months and is expected to be around about 18 months before endpoint assessment will take place. So employers should work closely with any training provider to plan and deliver the training appropriately. This working closely will add value to the employer as it centres on real working competence demonstrated in a real working environment. So to drive quality and consistency through on-programme learning, employers may wish to consider some of the following. The use of a normal performance management process to monitor the progress of the apprentice, provide feedback and guidance and development. The training providers may support ensuring the requirements of the apprenticeship standards are reflected in the process that I've just mentioned, and also by filling any gaps through the work with the apprentice. Employers and training providers, they must carry out joint reviews of the progress at regular intervals, involving the apprentice, the line managers and other direct relationships that they may have whilst working. It's also an opportunity to agree how they can resolve any issues that they have. Apprentices must develop and maintain examples of their work throughout their apprenticeship that cover the full standard. And this could form part of a portfolio or any other tracking methods that you may wish to use, which can be reviewed at the regular intervals, which is the 2 months suggested. The endpoint assessment is synoptic and takes place at the end of the apprenticeship learning programme, and it would be after the a minimum of 12 months on learning. Structured meeting then needs to be held with the apprentice, the employer, in conjunction with a training provider. An EPA must only take place once the employer is confident that the apprentice has developed the knowledge and skills and behaviours defined in the standards. And at that time, Maths and English must be completed. So a discussion takes place to ensure that the apprentice is ready, and also to discuss some of the highs and lows of their achievements and challenges during the apprenticeship journey. And once this is complete, then the apprentice can be formally signed off, and the endpoint assessment process can then begin. At this point, a further meeting will be arranged to include the endpoint assessor, who will then be provided with a completed readiness report for endpoint assessment. And this must be done at least 1 week in advance. The assessment can then be conducted remotely, and at this point the plan will be agreed and how and when the assessment activities are going to be completed. With this, they must then the on-demand test, the practical observation, the culinary challenge must be completed prior to the professional discussion taking place. So the on-demand test, it's a 90-minute multiple choice test, scenario-based, and this is externally set and marked by City and Guilds, and will be undertaken on the employer's premises or off-site. The practical observation, this is a 4-hour observation. It needs to cover both preparation and service in the workplace, and it enables the apprentice to demonstrate their work in an operational kitchen environment. You must consider the best time to carry out this assessment, how best the apprentice can carry out the practical and practical observation within a synoptic approach. And that's it. Thank you. And the business project. Sorry, go back one. The business project, this allows the apprentice to look at the opportunities and challenges that they may have seen during the apprenticeship. They can present ideas for improvement to the food operation, for example, efficiencies, reducing food cost, wastage, etc. And this must be researched and written up within 2 months and presented to both the employer and the endpoint assessor with a 30-minute presentation followed by a question and answer session. Once the on-demand test, practical observation and the business project are completed, the learner then can complete the professional discussion. It's a 40-minute discussion between the apprentice and the endpoint assessor. And the purpose of the professional discussion, this is to clarify any questions that the independent assessor may have based on their assessment of the learner journey and practical observations so far. So this is just a reminder of what gets covered throughout the senior chef production journey. We're looking at the knowledge, know it, the show it, and the live it throughout culinary, food safety, business, and people. So the final decision or the marking criteria, the on-demand test is graded for pass, being 70% up to 84%, which will gain 1 point, or 85% or above is a distinction for 2 points. For both practical observation and the business project, they'll be looking at a difference of competence or distinction, where competence would be a pass worth 1 point or a distinction 3. For the professional discussion, the competence will provide the apprentice with 1 point or excellence with 2. And then for an overall pass, the learner must achieve 4 points or 9 points for a distinction. So the hospitality supervisor standard, the following specialist functions are available for apprentices to follow, and that's food and beverage service, food and beverage supervisor, bar supervisor, concierge, housekeeping, front office, hospitality outlet, or events supervisor.
Okay, we're now going to go for our second poll question. You'll see it flash up on your screen shortly. Please choose the appropriate answer. And this question is, which of the occupational routes will you be offering? Concierge supervisor, housekeeping supervisor, front office supervisor, hospitality outlet supervisor, or event supervisor? Okay. As you can see the results, 81% of you chose hospitality outlet supervisor, and that followed up with 50% for housekeeping. Ready? Yep, that's you, Jason.
Thank you. Okay, so hospitality supervisor and the occupational standards. Hospitality supervisor can be working in a wide range of establishments, for example, bars, restaurants, cafes, conference centres, banqueting venues, hotels, or contract caterers. The role is varied, and although as a hospitality supervisor tend to specialise in an area, they may have to be adaptable to be ready to support team members across the business. The range is split into 3 sections covering knowledge, skills and behaviours. Before your specialist function closely looks at the people skills, customers, and the understanding of the business. The range to be covered can be found in the hospitality supervisor occupational standards, and the following specialist functions are available for apprenticeships. Sorry, we've already covered that one. How many? Oh, sorry. The apprenticeships that we will be covering initially will be food and beverage supervisor and bar supervisor. And sorry, event supervisor also. So the endpoints assessment, it follows a very similar structure. So I won't go through it as I did with senior chef, but it follows a very similar structure to that of the senior chef production. And again, just another reminder of how it's broken down into know it, show it, and the skills and behaviours, covering customer, business, and people. Again, the grading criteria is exactly the same setup to that you've just seen with regards to senior chef. Okay, so planning your delivery and the points to consider. You need to familiarise yourself with the standards. Absolutely essential in the first instance. Understand how to register learners. This will be available once we are accepted onto the register through our Bravo submission, which, like I already said, we expect that to be approximately 6 weeks from, between 4 and 6 weeks from now. So support material, do you need them for both senior chef and hospitality supervisor? An interim learning manual will be available to support the learner journey and released once learners are registered. Now that will be available on a paper-based system, or you would be able to use it from Learning Assistant, which will be the current standards that are published on People First website that have been transferred onto Learning Assistant, and the later material will follow shortly after. Staffing, do you have the skills within your team to support the delivery? What will endpoint assessment look like? How will you book it? Who will you liaise with? And how will you actually just manage that process? These things need to be considered now. Full guidance is also available through our business managers. So how can we support you? There will be, as listed there, there'll be the Learner Journal. We haven't currently got any mapping towards existing qualifications, but we may do so if we find that needed. Endpoint assessment packs, CPD events, consultancy accreditation is also available. A dedicated advisor is available to support you in the centre should you require it. Ongoing webinars, smart screen resources, learning assistance, which are e-portfolio files, and that's it. So, learner manual key features. Feedback from the majority of employers is that they would prefer not to have a qualification running alongside the standards as we prepare learners for this endpoint assessment journey. There's going to be tasks within this journal which will provide a full coverage of the standards. And each one contains a list of key terms and definitions, the details on how each task relates to the standards, and the differentiation between past and distinction where applicable, but that'll be more the learner identifying that than anyone else. Activities to check apprenticeship understanding, or the apprentices' understanding, and practical tasks to allow the learner to apply their knowledge to their own role. We'll also have reflective practice in there for the learners to consider what they've learned and what they need to improve on, how to do it. And the Learner Journal will also provide a great evidence log should they need it at a later point. So endpoint assessment, this is the endpoint assessment pack. It's a key document for customers for planning and the delivery of the apprenticeship. It includes the standards, guidance on how to book endpoint assessment, a guidance on how each aspect of EPA process will be carried out, any planning that's required prior to endpoint assessments, expectations during endpoint assessments, and any feedback and completion of EPA. So what we will produce, what we will produce, can't get the words out. What we will be producing is a key document for endpoint assessment to conduct this and grade the candidates. The pack will also include guidance on how to review the portfolio against the relevant sections of the occupational brief, and guidance on what they need to see as part of the valid practical observations. It'll also have guidance on the the professional discussion, including any key questions that may be asked and prompted during the discussion. So a brief look at the timeline of events. Wall Garden will be up for registration probably late this month or early into October. Endpoint assessment packs available. Interim apprenticeship manual will also be available. In March time, we're looking at the endpoint assessment booking reservation to be open, smart screen available, and full apprenticeship manual to be released. And then from September 2018, endpoint assessment to be available. Price-wise, endpoint assessment for senior chef is at £1,000, hospitality supervisor £1,000. Anyone wishing a further breakdown of the fees, such as receipts and on program material, you get them through the business manager. And the approval process, just a few things around this. If you're new to City and Guilds, you will need to gain endpoint assessment financial approval. If you're already a current City and Guilds centre, you will need to apply for endpoint assessment approval for the occupation you wish to deliver on. If you wish to deliver the qualification linked to the standards, you will need to apply for a qualification approval. There's just a brief outline of the reservation window. And after successful endpoint assessment, the grades are agreed, and it just goes on to tell you the information leading up to certification. Details on screen there, and you can log onto our website and click on this link when you have it to if you're interested in becoming an endpoint assessor. And next steps, you need to look at your offer. What does it look like? How will you be targeting? Or who will you be targeting, and what occupation routes will you be looking at, and what appeals to you in your local area, looking at the 20% off the programme, and the milestones that your learners would need to fulfil during the journey, and also looking at your staffing and skills within your organisation, and how endpoint assessment is going to be carried out. Okay, so that's just if you would like any other information from us. There's a link to further information such as an apprenticeship audit that you may wish to carry out. and further links that will be available to you with regards to support and resources that will be made available. And finally, I'd just like to thank you all for listening, and any questions?
Okay, give us 2 seconds, we'll set some questions up on the screen and we'll get Jason answering those very shortly. So on the right hand side, you will see a questions tab. Please could you type your questions into the tab and we'll do our best to answer as many that come through.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions coming in through now. So the first question we'll get Jason to answer is, this is not directly relevant, but please could you tell me when the on-program support will be available for hospitality team member and what this will consist of?
Okay, at the moment we're still waiting on the Bravo submission to be accepted, and that we're waiting on a decision on that any time now. It's slightly ahead of the level 3 submissions. So once we've got that, then we can start releasing what we have got. It will. There is a learner manual in place for both of the level 2 occupations. Whether it will be fully complete in time for the release date, I'm not sure at this moment. But we will certainly be releasing aspects of it in due course.
Okay, we have another question. How much will resets of the endpoint assessment be?
I don't have the recent figures at my as we speak, but they are available through the business managers. They have got that information.
Okay. Another question. When you say within 2 months for writing up the project, is that 2 months before EPA?
Once EPA starts, they will have 2 months to complete that process.
Okay. Another question. Please, if you have any questions, please type them in and we'll get Jason to answer them now. Is it possible to email the presentation to colleges so we can deliver to colleagues in team development meetings?
That will be happening anyway. You will be receiving the slides. Also, the level 2 slides are available now, should you wish to use those. They're online.
Cool. Okay, so we're just waiting for some of you to write some more questions, as we don't have any more. So we'll give you a moment to write some more of your questions.
While we wait for a few of you to answer those questions, we've got one final poll for you. So I'm going to flash that on the screen now. This is, would you offer Chef de Partie level 3? I'm going to launch that right now. And the answers are yes, no, I'm interested, but I need more information, or I don't know. Okay, I'm going to share the results with you. 50% of you said I'm interested, but need more information, and 33% of you said yes, so that's very positive. Do we have any more questions, Jodie?
No, no more questions.
Okay, guys, if you have any questions at all, please get them through to us, so Jason can answer them.
Yeah, we do have quite a bit of time left, so if you have any questions, let us know. 50% of you said you're interested but need more information. Now's your chance. No questions?
Okay. So just to let you guys know, the recording, the Q&As and the slides will be made available after the webinar. I'd like to say a big thank you to Jason, Ben and Noah Tiso. And thank you for you guys to attending. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.